fact check later.
Good evening to everyone. Thank you all for being here, both in person and virtually. What I want to do is talk a little bit about who we are, what we're doing, and how we're going to go about doing what we're doing. My name is Jeff Schlanger. I am the Independent Consent Decree Monitor. I'm also the president of IntegraSure, and we were selected through a competitive process to serve as the monitoring team to ensure that the mandates of the consent decree are in fact carried out. With me tonight in person is Aaron Pilniak, the deputy monitor, Cassie Chandler, raise your hand, great, who's handling our recruitment, hiring, and promotion work stream, JT Thomas, who's handling our community outreach work stream, and Ed Dudowski, who's handling our fire rescue work stream. We also have with us virtually Robin Engel, who leads our biased policing work stream, Jane Perloff, who leads our stops work stream, Denise Lewis, who leads our accountability and transparency work stream, and George Camacho, who is our chief writer. Unfortunately, Rick Brown, who heads our use of force work stream, and Brandon Del Pozo cannot be with us tonight. Bios of all of the members of our team can be found on our newly launched website, which can be found at auroramonitor.org. There are a couple of points that I really want to stress tonight. The first relates to our title and our role. We are the independent monitor team, and I stress, obviously, independent. We do not report to the city. We do not report to the Attorney General. Our primary job is to make certain that that which the city agreed to do in terms of reforms are in fact carried out. We will always call things as we see them. We will hold the city's feet to the fire, but at the same time, we will be providing and lending our expertise that the team that you've just met brings to this project. And the reason we are doing that is to help the city of Aurora reach the substantial compliance with the mandates of the consent decree as quickly as is possible, so that you, the residents of Aurora, feel those as quickly as possible. In the 60 days since we were appointed, and that was February 14th of this year, we have received exemplary cooperation from the city, from the APD, from AFR, and the Civil Service Commission. And while we know that there are changes coming to the leadership of the police department, we fully expect and in fact have been assured that that degree of cooperation will continue. I am here to assure you that we will work and we will do our work irrespective of who may sit in which seat in city government. The consent decree is a binding agreement enforceable by the court. The consent decree and the monitorship will in fact be constants until the reform which is outlined in that decree is in fact achieved. The next thing I want to stress is that we are committed to fully and meaningfully engaging with the community. And in order to do that, we will be holding these town halls periodically. We expect to hold one in conjunction with the release of each of our reports, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But more importantly, we are forming a Community Advisory Council, or CAC. And I'm happy to announce that Pastor Reed Heddick and Omar Montgomery have agreed to serve as co-chairs of the council, and you will be hearing from them in just a few moments with additional details about the CAC. Our team has been engaged in police reform in one way or another for a very long time. And over that time, we have seen that consent decrees can bring about tremendous change in a city. They can be a tremendous tool, not only in bringing about community trust and increasing community trust, but in fostering the reforms that at the same time will address issues of public safety, that is, reducing crime and officer safety. The reforms will change things not only for the benefit of the residents of Aurora, but also for the men and women of public safety, the vast, vast majority of whom came to their jobs to do good and want nothing more than clear direction on how to do so. More importantly, if the reforms are done correctly, if we as monitors do our job correctly, the benefits for residents and public safety officers alike will long outlast our presence here. Our goal is to make Aurora the model of public safety for decades to come. But that can only happen if you, the community, are ultimately satisfied that the standards that have been set for APD and AFR in providing public safety services to the city are being adhered to. In the years to come, we will be listening closely to you and to the CAC to understand if the community's expectations are being met. The process which brought us to this point began long before IntegraSure became the monitor. It began with a reform bill which gave certain powers to the Attorney General, powers that he executed in launching an investigation which culminated in the city agreeing to the consent decree that brings us here today. With that, I would like to invite Janet Drake from the Attorney General's office to say a few words.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I need the mic?
I don't
think so.
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you. It's an honor to be here on behalf of Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser. And I'd just like to take one moment to thank my colleagues who worked on this case with us, who continue to support this effort. Alexa Jones is here in the audience. Alexa, thank you for your hard work. You're so smart and dedicated to this, as we all are. You all are community members. You live here. You care about this. And that's obvious, or you wouldn't have made the time to be here today. During our investigation, we tried to do some outreach to community stakeholders and community groups at large. Some of you are here who we've had the opportunity to speak with, and we certainly appreciate and value your input. That won't change in this process. You are critical to the success of this operation. We want you to not only feel safe in your community, but to be safe in your community. We want to make sure that crime victims are being served well, that law enforcement are offered the training that they need to do their job safely, so that we can all come together, prevent crime, reduce crime, and serve crime victims well. And we're committed to that. We're committed to meaningful, lasting change that doesn't just look good on a page. It doesn't just check a box for a judge, but it's change that you want, that you think is important, and that is working for you. So you will be critical throughout this process, and I invite you to reach out to me anytime if there's something happening that you want to communicate with the Attorney General's office about. There certainly are processes in place to gather community input from community stakeholders and from community members at large. But if you're not feeling like those methods are working, it's really critical that we have that communication and that we know we're listening, you know you're being heard, and that if there's a gap there, that we're able to fill it so that we can be successful and make a positive change that works for you and that lasts for the sake of our communities and for our safety. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you, Jeff, for your and your team's expertise and willingness to help us move forward to reach these goals.
Thank you, Janet. And of course, we wouldn't be here, at least not at this juncture, if the city had not agreed to the terms of the consent decree, by the way, many of which were well underway in terms of reforms when we got here. So I'd like to ask City Manager Jim Twombly to say a few words.
Thanks, Jeff. And I want to emphasize a couple of things that Jeff said. One was that IntegraSure is the independent monitor. And another thing that he said was that they're here to hold the city's feet to the fire. So it's very important, I think, for our community to understand that we, the city, will be accountable. We're being held accountable. And as he said, it's with the court. It's not with a bureaucrat or, it's with the court in Oklahoma. Or, I'm sorry, that's where I was yesterday, Colorado. So that's very important. The other piece that's really important, and Janet touched on this nicely, I think, is the role of the community in this. Everything in the consent decree points towards a partnership between the city and the community in terms of defining what the future of this police department looks like, the way that we respond to our residents and businesses, the way that we train, the way we select officers, and on and on. And your input is going to be critical, really and integral to all of our processes as we go forward. And so you keep an eye on the independent monitor, who will keep an eye on the city, and I think working together like that will end up with a much improved police and fire department. And thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Jim. I'd like to take a few minutes just to go over some of the aspects of the consent decree itself. I know most of you are not familiar or intimately familiar with those terms, but I do think that most of you know that the consent decree grew out of the tragic death of Elijah McClain. And that focused a spotlight on public safety in Aurora, and has the goal, the consent decree does, of improving certain practices of the Aurora Police Department, Aurora Fire Rescue, and the Civil Service Commission. The practices involved fall into 6 specific areas: racial bias in policing, use of force, documentation of stops, use of ketamine and other sedatives as a chemical restraint, recruitment, hiring, and promotion, and lastly, accountability, the disciplinary process, and oversight. Overlaying all of those work streams is our community involvement and outreach. I want to stress that the consent decree team is not involved in the day-to-day operations of the police department, the fire department, or the Civil Service Commission. Rather, the job of the consent decree monitor is to, again, hold the city's feet to the fire and make sure that the mandates that the city has agreed to are in fact carried out. As I mentioned earlier, the changes that that we will see by virtue of the consent decree build on certain reforms which have already been undertaken to improve APD and AFR, and that are ultimately designed to instill a culture of continuous improvement in those agencies so as to best serve the residents of Aurora. For this town hall, we are going to highlight the work of 3 work streams: our recruitment, hiring, and promotion work stream, our fire rescue work stream, and our community outreach and involvement work stream. And we're going to have the work stream leaders talk a little bit about those 3 work streams, and I'd like to start with Cassie Chen.
Thank you, Jeff. So one of the things that we'll be looking at when we're looking at the key work stream of recruit, hire, promote, it's going to be taking a look at how are we doing it to ensure that we're putting in place sufficient diversity and getting the best and most qualified candidates. So when we're thinking of the words, I want you to keep it all in the back of your mind when we're coming together to talk to you again and again over the next few months. Keep in mind that we're looking at a recruiting process, a hiring process, and a promotion process that looks at diversity, ensuring that it's there, and qualified. Okay? That's the primary aspects that's requested in the consent decree. The second part of what Jeff outlined for you was he said we're going to improve the transparency and accountability and the predictability of the disciplinary process so that you'll get to know transparency, what's really going on. How are people being held accountable? What is the discipline process saying and showing to us? In order for us to do those 2 things, the work stream that I'm going to have some oversight with and the people I'll be working with will be the city. It's going to be each of the departments. It's going to be very significantly the Civil Service Commission, and we're also going to be working together with the city and HR to come up with the right processes, something that's going to be long-term, sustainable, and you'll be able to have full transparency. So when we're looking at it and you're thinking about it, I want you to keep these words in the back of your mind. If we're thinking about people, we're looking at more diverse, consistently qualified. When we're thinking about the second part, it's the processes. How are all the processes we're working on, whether it's in fire and rescue, police department, Civil Service Commission, everywhere where we're looking that has an input, how are we doing it in a way that's transparent and sustainable? So whatever we're doing, however we're recruiting, however we're moving forward today, we can see the same things happening 10 years from now. And no matter who comes in roles, how things change, the sustainability will always be there. And part of that sustainability and the transparency is making sure you have input. So look for us to make sure you know. If you don't know, then you've got some feet to hold to the fire too, right? We hold our feet to the fire, and we'll be holding the other feet to the fire. But it all works together. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cassie. Next, we'd like to hear from our fire rescue workstream leader, Ed Dudowski.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. I want to focus on three primary points this evening. First of all, Aurora Fire Rescue has pledged to no longer use ketamine in the future. And many of the AFR mandates in the consent decree, they're focused on ketamine. The monitor will focus on AFR continuing to not use ketamine. And if there's any movement or suggestion of using ketamine in the future, the monitor will see the procedure, approve the procedure before it ever would go back into use. I think that was primary number one. Number two, the consent decree monitor is tasked with oversight of policies and procedures of AFR and APD to ensure that APD members in no way have any influence on Aurora Fire Rescue members for the use of chemical sedatives for any reason. So it's something that we're looking at very closely as well. The monitor will continue to provide oversight of AFR for the use of all chemical restraints and to, again, ensure that ketamine is not used. Finally, the consent decree monitor will continue work in collaboration with the fire department, the police department, the city, and the Attorney General office. And the monitor will also seek input, perhaps most importantly, from the community to ensure compliance with the policies and that everything we do is okay and in favor of and supported by the community. Those were the three areas that I primarily wanted to cover, and thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Ed. And just before we get to JT talking about our community outreach, I want to note that our acting chief, Chris Jewell, is here with us, and virtually we have our chief, fire chief, Fernando Gray as well. So I apologize for not mentioning that earlier, Chris. Fernando. Now we'd like to hear from our community outreach workstream leader, JT.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for everybody that came out. I know sometimes it's difficult to get out on an evening after work and all the challenges. So really, really appreciate every one of you for coming out and the reflection of diversity here. My work stream is tied into each and every one of the others because that is where the rubber meets the road. That's where we as a team will get the information relative to what are the expectations of you, the community. I'm looking forward to working with as many of you as possible. I've already begun to have some preliminary conversations and meetings with Pastor Reed Heidick and Omar Montgomery, and I really appreciate the outreach and the information that's been provided by them. I think one of the most important things I can say about my background, growing up in South Central Los Angeles as a male black, I never had a great relationship with the police until I became one. And then it offered me a perspective that is unique, and I think that offers a lot of insight to where policing and this community and communities across the country are at this time. I understand the negative impact when the relationship between law enforcement and public safety breaks down. But I also know that as a result of my background, coming from LAPD and seeing the work that was done to transform the relationship between that department and its marginalized communities, I wholeheartedly believe that this will even be a better success because of the level of engagement by all of the stakeholders. Aurora, as similar to Los Angeles, is a very diverse community, very diverse interests, very diverse expectations of public safety. But it requires from public safety that it's reflective of the diversity of those communities, that also those departments are free from bias, that the training and expectations marry up to the communities that the officers and the firefighters serve. It also requires at this time that these departments collaborate with those departments in new and innovative and encouraging ways to share the responsibility for keeping those communities safe. And how will we do that? Jeff mentioned the establishment of the Community Advisory Council. That's where the feedback comes in. That's where the engagement comes in. That's where the participation is extremely vital. That's off the ground and it's proceeding. We'll also do that through the establishment of a multilingual website to keep the larger public up to date on the monitorship progress. Again, that's another layer of input and accountability that's important to the work that we do and the success of getting and meeting the expectations. Again, hopefully this is not a beautiful place to have a town hall meeting, but I hope that we have the ones in the future will be out where it's more convenient for members of the community, that we come to where you are, to your neighborhood, to where you live, and we get a sense of not only this opinions, but also I think the opinions of the young people in those communities is vitally important. And then the focus groups to provide other avenues by which we can get information and listen to and get a better understanding of what needs to be done. The doors will always be open. We are very collaborative and participatory and welcome the feedback from as many points of contact as possible. Thank you.
Thanks so much, JT. Just a little bit about what we've been doing over these last 60 days. We've been meeting with stakeholders. We have been participating in ride-alongs, both with the police department and fire rescue. We have been establishing our website, and I'll give it another plug, auroramonitor.org. Lots of good information there. We have been providing technical assistance in a few areas of the consent decree, and we'll continue to do that, and in other areas as well. And we have been working on what we call the methodologies to aid in the determination of compliance, or MADCs. And to talk a little bit about our MADCs, I'd like to turn the program over to Erin Pilniak, our Deputy Monitor.
Good evening. I also want to echo everyone's sentiments and thank you for coming this late in the evening today. Our main function as consent decree monitor team is to audit and monitor and make sure that the agencies are meeting each of the mandates of the decree. In essence, providing integrity assurance, making sure that the agencies are meeting what is required of them under the consent decree. We'll do this through a variety of methods, which is documented in what Jeff just referred to as our methodologies to aid in the determination of compliance. And I'll do another plug for our website, and it was published on our website on April 16th. Thank you. And that website is auroramonitor.org. And while compliance monitoring in policing can be and is a dynamic process by the nature of the task, it is critical that the goalposts do not change midstream. And it is for these reasons that these methodologies have been arrived working collaboratively with the parties and the stakeholders. And the methodologies are designed to allow not just the parties and stakeholders, but the public to have full understanding and appreciation of what's required under the consent decree from the city, from the Aurora Police Department, from the Aurora Fire Rescue, and then from the Civil Service Commission in terms of achieving compliance with each of the mandate. In essence, this document is really designed to provide transparency to what compliance should look like. It is our belief that the application of the methodologies contained in the MADC in the vast majority of the cases will be dispositive of defining what compliance looks like. Although this document envisions scheduled reviews by reporting periods, the monitor intends to continuously be on the lookout for any kind of significant deviation, from individual mandates of the decree or its underlying goals. And in any instance in which such deviation is identified, our job will be to note it, obviously, and then to bring that to the attention of the parties immediately and clearly articulate the basis of why we're identifying this deviation and work with them in providing direction to remediate the situation. After each reporting period, our goal is to publish a public report. We'll issue, along with that public report, a report card that will clearly show the city's progress with each of the mandates. We'll also hold a public forum to discuss these findings once we publish these public reports. Now, our first reporting period will conclude on May 15th, and it's our intent and goal to publish our first public report no later than July 15th of this year. All of those key dates and the reporting periods and when you can expect the public reports are also on the website, and you can find them there. These efforts, including the public reports and the publications of the MADCs, are just part of our commitment of being transparent throughout this monitorship and holding ourselves accountable to you. We invite you to review the MADCs, and please feel free to reach out to us with any concerns or questions.
Thank you, Erin. You've heard me mention, and JT mentioned, the Community Advisory Council, the CAC, a couple of times this evening. The concept of the council is quite simple. It will provide community input and guidance regarding the efforts of the city, and will be the finger on the pulse of the community to determine to what extent the reforms that are being undertaken by the two departments are actually being felt on the streets of Aurora. We have chosen two prominent residents of Aurora to form and lead the council. I would now like to introduce Omar Montgomery and Reed Heddick to talk a little bit more about the council and to moderate the question and answer period. Thank you. Reed, Omar, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, team. Man, you guys are impressive with all of the knowledge and all the stuff that you bring to the table. Really excited to have you on board. But I'm even more excited to be among neighbors and friends to talk through some of these things here tonight. It's been a tough last few years in Aurora. It's been a tough last few years for public safety in Aurora. And I am excited to be at a point where we're talking about solutions. We're talking about fixing things. Now, there may be some things we have to deal with along the way. But it is great to be together in community, with community to do this. I noted about 3 times you were invited to participate. I heard it from Jeff and Integrisure. I heard it from the Attorney General's office. I heard it from our city manager, that we are invited to engage. And so let's engage. Let's step up and do that. That's kind of what we are here for. And it's really key that we do this so that we have the right kind of balance here in the community. When we get done with this, I mean, we can point fingers at Integrisure. Might be kind of fun to do that periodically. We can certainly point fingers at city people. We can point fingers at police department and fire department. Even virtually, we can point fingers. But in the end, it's up to us to really make sure that this process works like it can. And so let's do that. That's why we're here tonight. Okay, enough. I did my Easter sermon a couple days ago. I don't need to relive that here tonight. So Omar, say a few things, and we'll talk about some ground rules.
First, I'd just like to say thank you for this opportunity. The city of Aurora means a lot to me. The residents mean a lot to me. There are some residents that's in pain right now. There are some residents that still feel like enough hasn't been done. And then there are some residents that's like, hey, on the public safety side, I want to know that when I call my public safety agency that they're there, they're able to respond, and that they respond appropriately. And so one day what I would like to see, and this is no criticism, is that this side of the room is mixed with this side of the room, and we're all trusting and bonding each other, and I hope that consent decree can get us there.
That's right.
That's good.
That's what I would like to see. That's the ultimate goal. And those that are hurting, we have to listen to them. And it may not come out the way you want it to come out. It may come out a little different, but they're hurting. And those who are saying, I want my city to be safe, we hope that by the end of this process, we have a fire department and we have a police department that is engaged with the community, and we have a community that trusts our law enforcement agents, so that the city of Aurora can heal, but at the same time truly acknowledging the problems and issues that we have to address in order to even think about moving forward. So I'm looking forward to being a part of that discussion and that movement.
So now we come to the fun part of the meeting, where you get to ask questions, address some of the things. And so let me give you some instructions about how that works. We're both virtual, and we have some people on the phone, and so there's a lot of moving parts here. So here's our plan. And so we'll go in the following order. So first of all, you showed up here, and so you get to go first. So people in the room are first. And then we will get to the people who have questions on WebEx. And then the last, we will talk to people who have dialed in on the phone that have questions to ask in that kind of way. For those of you in the room, you can ask your question from your seat. Don't need to get up, don't need to do anything else. The room has microphones, it'll probably pick you up. Be careful. There's microphones all over that will pick you up. But we'll also bring in this microphone so that other people in the room can hear you well. Those of you on WebEx, if you have a question, click the raised hand icon on the bottom of the WebEx screen. The icon looks like a little raised hand. We'll take questions in order to see your virtual hands go up. When it's your turn, we'll announce your name and unmute your microphone, and turn on you'll be able to allow to unmute yourself and turn on your camera. There we go. Those of you on the phone that want to ask questions, you'll need to dial *3 to raise your hand. That will allow us to know that you want to speak. We can't see your names on our screen, but we can see the first several digits of your phone number. So when it's your turn, we will announce those digits of your phone number out loud and unmute your phone. You will hear the system tell you that you are unmuted. Okay? It says no matter where you are, in person, on WebEx, or on the phone, raise your hand and we'll call on you. So those are the official instructions. Let me give you a couple of unofficial instructions. we want to get to as many people as possible, so keep your remarks brief. Some of you are good at asking questions that turn into speeches, okay? And limit that a little bit, okay? If you can kind of control that so that you're directing a question. You have some good things that you want to say, and we want to hear from you, but do that as briefly as you can so we can get to as many questions as possible. Then one other thing. There were some people nervous when we talked about having a live microphone, a live show that anybody could say anything that they wanted to say. And we pushed for that. We wanted that, and the monitor team wanted that as well. But let me ask you a favor, okay? As we do this, do you think we can do this with some dignity and respect and civility in the process? Maybe it's time for the community to step up and show others that we can disagree, we can be passionate about something, and still do it respecting one another. Does that sound reasonable? Let's do that, okay? Okay, so I think we're ready to take some questions. And so if you're here in the room, raise your hand, we'll get you a microphone, and you get to be first. I think I saw the hand there. 1, 2, and then we're going about 3.
The mic doesn't work. They'll just have to, these mics work, they'll just have to talk in a loud voice.
Okay, so talk loud for us.
Okay, Nicholas Walker, Lidlow neighborhood. We're just south of here, cross I-225 into 6th Avenue. That neighborhood over there is where I'm representing. I'm concerned, I did not hear, Jim, 2 things that I would like to hear. One is inclusion and diversity having to do with purchasing and the external relationship between the vendors of the police department and the fire department and the city at large, because that is a critical issue. And I know maybe diversity is another issue that we need to talk about, but that is a critical issue that should be looked at as far as the police and fire at this point. The number 2, I did not hear the reporting mechanism as to how that's going to work. The communications coming back to the community in the form of what? Is it going to be like a website, which a lot of people in Ward 1 and Ward 3 do not have access to the website. There is a web void there. So I need to figure out how that's going to work. How you're including your ethnic diversity, diversified communications channels like media. So we need to know a little bit more about how you're going to execute and then feed back.
So let me take both questions, and then my colleagues can certainly chime in. With respect to the diversity in vendors, while we are dealing with diversity in the police department and fire rescue, we're not dealing in diversity of vendors, and there's a simple reason for that. The consent decree didn't address that, so it's not within our mandate. But we do have the city manager here, and we can certainly direct that question to him. I don't know, Jim, if you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd like to. That's a good question. It is something that we're working on. We currently have initiated what's called a disparity study that will look at purchasing citywide, what our vendor pool is now, what the makeup of that pool is with regard to diversity, and then look for ways, if we're not utilizing a diverse universe of vendors, ways that we can improve that so we do in the future. So we are addressing that.
Yeah, I'd like to stay on that. Will you keep me involved with that?
The second question dealt with our reporting mechanism. Aaron outlined a little bit about that. So we're going to be issuing, during our first year, quarterly reports. Our first quarterly report will cover the period of February 15th through May 15th. That's 3 months. We'll take a month to write the report, and we'll circulate a draft so that the participants, the stakeholders, can see whether or not they believe we have made any factual errors or that there may be sensitive material of one kind of or another in the report that shouldn't be made public, like names and addresses. So that will take another month, and we'll publish on July 15th. The report will be posted on our website. But you raise a very good point. Many folks don't have the means to get on a website, and we'd love to work with you in figuring out how to get that report out more publicly. We will hold a town hall after each report, and those folks can certainly come into a room like this. Hopefully we'll have many more chairs filled. Not that this isn't a great turnout. The website is available in 100 languages, so any language can in fact be covered. Of course, you can go to the library or other public locations that may have access to a computer and visit the website that way. In terms of media, major media is certainly involved, but there may be ethnic media that we are not covering, and we'd love to hear about that. And I know the city would love to hear about it as well to get there. But to the extent that we want to get the word out, we need folks like you who will help us do that. And of course, the Community Advisory Council will be doing that as well.
Excuse me, could it be attached to the, like they sometimes send out the community town meetings attached to that as far as the form?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You mean tag along with somebody else's meeting?
Yeah, well, I mean, the city sends out when they're having the meetings, not just on the internet, because my internet is on my phone, but where they mail it, because I get stuff all the time.
I see.
And attach it to that.
The notice of the meeting and the agenda for the meeting.
Yeah, and then the results.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm sorry.
No, you good.
I'm via Mance, and I'm representing Winchester neighborhood. One thing that I'm concerned about that I did not hear a mention of is mental health care. I feel that we're leaving out a big component when we're not talking about the mental health care, because what happened with Elijah McClain, if we had a mental health care professional there at that time, this would have never happened, because he told them, don't touch me. He had a space. He said, don't touch me. Yeah. So I think, are we going to leave that out? Because that's very important. We need to make sure that these cops have a mental health professional with them when a case is difficult. Then we won't get to lawsuits and people dying.
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, mental health is not covered directly in the consent decree, but it is a component of many aspects of the consent decree, and specifically the use of force. Yes. So we will be paying attention to that issue very, very closely. We had discussions today with the fire department about roles that they could potentially play in the process. And I know I was here the last time I was traveling up to the mountains to go skiing, and I turned on the radio, and there was a national news article about the efforts that Aurora is making, highlighted on the CBS Evening News. And maybe Jim wants to talk a little bit about that effort.
Yes, we have two different types of teams that respond to mental or behavioral health calls that come into 911. So we have a team that's an officer and a mental health clinician, social work clinician that can respond, and we also have a team that's a paramedic and a social work clinician. And so we recognize the need to really send the appropriate type of response to those types of calls that come in. And we're looking at expanding both of those in the future, because in tracking the calls, we continue to see the growth in that type of call.
And I'm worried about our homeless individuals. When we encounter them, they are suffering. Some of those are veterans who are suffering, and they're out on the street, and they're having PTSD, and then someone comes up to them and they see you as being aggressive, you think you're just moving them along, but they see you as coming to harm them, they're going to strike out at you. So I just want us to make sure that everyone's safe when we have an encounter with the police officers.
And we appreciate that comment, and we are looking at expanding both of those programs just for those reasons.
And Jim, could you also speak to some of the training that the officers go through, on to some of those calls as well?
Yeah. A contingent of officers has gone through crisis intervention training, specialized training. I'm not sure if it's a 40-hour training block, 40 hours. And so they've gone through that, and they also have been trained to be able to better de-escalate situations where we might have a mental health issue, or we might have a drug interaction situation. So that's something I think over the last 3 years we've really tried to emphasize, and as I said, are looking at expanding that even more just because of the call volume.
Just one last thing on that point. Coincidentally to our work here in Aurora, we are also doing work for the state legislature, looking at best practices, and this is one of the areas that we are looking at, and there is not a hard wall between those two assignments, so we will be bringing back what we learned from our study of best practices across the entire country and bringing that back here to Aurora as well.
Thank you. Janet Drake from the Attorney General's Office. I just wanted to comment on that point that the Attorney General's Office has heard this concern. We not only have we heard it in communication, but we understand the concern. We understand the gravity of the concern, and it's concerning across the board. On my team, the criminal justice section, we have the police officer standards and training. And Attorney General Phil Weiser has made it a priority to look at how we're training law enforcement and first responders and try and enhance that training. So we are in the process right now of doing a job analysis, which is statewide, and we will use that data and information to help us improve the training that first responders get so that they are safer and so that our communities are being served and our communities are safer. And that's something that we hope to implement across our whole state. So a bit outside of the topic tonight, and thank you for the opportunity to just address that, because it is an important issue that relates to stops and it relates to use of force, which are topics of the decree. Thank you.
My name is Vanessa Salinas. I haven't lived in the community for 27 years, but I recently moved back. My question is, in the consent decree, and I have to look at it, is it specific about the word diversity? Because I've heard you all use it. And it's such a buzzword sometimes. Some communities are like, oh, diversity. And some communities are very accepting about it. I would want to hear from you, not so much this diversity, 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 more of what is best for the representation of the community. I've read some of the stats, and the police department is not representative of the community, as you talked about, as the veteran community, as all of the people who live in this community. And, you know, that's socioeconomic. It's a variety of things. And all I'm hearing is this buzzword diversity, which separates rather than unites.
Cassie, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think one of the things you'd have to probably look at is what does diversity mean to you? And so a part of what we're looking at when we bring this collective group together, which we've already started, so with all of the different component parts who are doing the recruiting and the hiring for the departments, we're all sitting down right now at the table starting with the very basics. What is diversity? What does the community look like? What do our numbers look like? Where are we recruiting? Where are we failing? Where are we doing better? So it's looking at not just, I think the buzzwords that you hear when you hear diversity is black and it's white. It's more than that. And this group does recognize that when we're talking about the word diversity. So we're building. I'm sorry, dear. Wait 1 second. So we have to build the whole concept of what does diversity mean to Aurora, as opposed to what it might mean to anywhere and everywhere else. And that does bring into play what does it mean in the community.
I'm just not hearing that from what you guys are saying. I'm just not hearing it. And I have done my homework. I knew I was going to move back here to retire. So I wanted to know what I was walking back into, following all these issues and looking at the diversity of this community. And I'm not hearing it. I just wanted you all to know I'm not hearing it. And I'm looking, I'm not looking at either side of this conversation. Like I said, I've been here in 27 years.
Yes.
But I don't feel that I'm the only one in this room that's not hearing it from y'all.
So let me make sure about this. So then when we're putting together that report that you're going to see, we're going to make sure you understand what diversity means. When we're looking at it, when we're examining it, and when we're putting the right processes and procedures and transparency in place, you will know what that means.
You will have the numbers in that report.
How you going to tell her? How you going to tell her how diversity? How you going to tell her how diversity looks to her? That doesn't even make sense.
It actually doesn't, because I've been doing this kind of work too.
Why don't I ask this question of you, ma'am? And we can start the conversation here, and we can certainly continue it offline. But why don't you tell us what the diversity does mean to you?
Representative of the community.
Black, brown, blue, green, yellow, purple.
Veteran,
Fair.
LGBTQ, it's representative of the community. What is the community of Aurora? Don't just throw out this big word that says diversity, but what is Aurora? And so talk about that, and you'll get more community buy-in.
Can I ask my question?
Can I just add?
Sure.
I hear you. We have to do a better job when we talk about diversity. Over 150 languages spoken in the city. We have the Ethiopian, the Oromo, we have West African, East African, we have a Korean community, almost to the point we want to call it Koreatown. I hear you. We have our ability community, one of the very few cities that actually have an ability park. But either way, we hear you. And as we put this community park together, we want to make sure that your voice is included in regards to what we may not be seeing when we talk about diversity as well. So thank you for your words, and we want to make sure that.
But we need to see action along with that. All right. My name is Alberta Simmons. I'm a civil rights activist, and I'm here tonight because I have a question, clearly. And my question is, independent monitor, Jeff.
Yes.
What are y'all going to do about your road cops who beat this man right here, this black man that's sitting right next to me to my left, beat him down to the white meat of his head? What are y'all going to do about that? You know what? I read a report the other day that said the Aurora police said the investigation is closed. How could that be? They tasered the man. First of all, he gets out of his car, they tackle the man. This is all on body cam, so ain't nobody making this up. They tackle the man. Not only did they tackle him, then they tasered him 3 or 4 different times while he's on the ground. Then the white female cop comes over and says, hog tie him. Then they hog tie him, and while he's hog tied, she comes over and the white cop does the George Floyd and puts her foot on his neck. Now wait a minute. At that point, there's another officer comes and slides over and does the karate hold. The same hold that Vanessa Wilson banned. She banned that hold because that hold killed Elijah McClain along with that ketamine. She banned it. He used it. He still has his job. You all talk about diversity, and you're talking about what y'all want to do as independent monitors. I'm telling you all that the black community, I don't speak for the entire black community, and none of these so-called preachers do either. Because at the end of the day, how can you as a black leader, a black minister, preacher, don't say nothing when you watch 5 black people get put on the ground in 100-degree weather? You don't say nothing.
Amen.
Then you watch this man here get beat to the white meat of his head. You don't say nothing. But the first time they fire Vanessa Wilson, you stand out there with a picket sign. We won't save our chief. Save her from what? She should have stopped that mess. That's why you say you the independent monitor. I asked you to help our community. Not only that, I've been trying to get with the Attorney General. They've been giving me some mumbo jumbo. I'm glad you are here today to hear from some passion, because we've been trying to get you all to help us. That guy told me some stuff over the phone what we had to do. I said we need to get the governor involved. Listen, those cops need to be fired. No, not reprimanded. They need to be fired. Yeah. They need to be prosecuted and fired. Yeah. That's what needs to happen to those officers. Now, anybody in this room that don't agree with me, you might not agree with the tone I said it, but I'm a very humble person. I believe in God, but at the end of the day, I believe in right too. And we need you all's help. So be independent and make them cops, hold them accountable. Amen.
I'll tell you one thing that we share for sure, and that is believing in right. I am completely unfamiliar with this incident at this point. We'll obviously be looking into it. Just hold on one second. The best police departments in the world are going to have incidents. That's unfortunate, but it's reality. The question that ultimately we need to get to is, how does the department deal with the incident after it happens? And the community, we want to get to the place where the community has trust in that process to make sure that if wrongdoing was done, that it is appropriately addressed. That's the point that we want to get to, and we'll try to get to it with this case as well. So I appreciate your comments. Believe me, we share in wanting what's right.
Thank you. That sister in the corner, come back. Or did you have to read? Go ahead, sister.
Yes. So what you were just speaking on, it's not just that. The response time for the police when we call them is horrible. I've waited 30 minutes to an hour. I was attacked at my own house, and I have over 150 calls to the police department. And where my house is 3 blocks away where the brother that they just killed, right around the corner from there. And I'm calling and waiting. I get knocked out in front of my own house. I'm laying in the street for 15 minutes. I wake up. I call the police. I don't know who this guy is. I get the detective. I call him. I says, "Sir, well, I don't work for that department anymore. I moved on." And that's for 2 detectives. I have their cards in there, Mr. Knight and Mr. Wilson. They've moved on. So they didn't investigate this. So I'm taking in, my grandkids can't come over no more. My yard's going to crap. It kills my dogs, poking my tires, this, that. And I say, well, I borrow a gun from my friend, so next time he comes on my mom's birthday, that tears my truck up. It's tore up out there, over $3,000 or $4,000 worth of stuff in my truck. Now, because I shot at him, I'm on 7 years of probation, or I'm going to prison, and he's a criminal. He's got a criminal record from every state. My friend, I'm afraid. I'm old school. I'm afraid to even look it up because I won't say I'm stalking him. This is killing me. It's killing me. I'm like this to wash dishes in my own front door. I've been living there since '93. I'm like this washing dishes in my kitchen sink. And no one hears me. No one's addressing. I'm a senior citizen. This man jumps on me, knocks me out, keeps coming back, and no support. I'm about ready to kill myself because I don't be 7 years of probation or nothing like that. Can you imagine at 64 years old that you run in the house at 5:30 when it gets dark? I can't ride my bike. I can't have my grandkids come over. He's killed my dog. He's torn my truck up. I'm buying SUV tires at $800, and he's poking holes in them every time I turn it. I don't have money like that. I bought an ADT system. I bought a security system. I don't have money like that. I live by myself. and no support, none. I went to the probation, they, well, we can't do anything, we just put your, I don't have money like that. I'd lose my job at the VA, where I'm helping veterans, and no one hear me, no one's, there's, oh, they got a restraining against me, but not against him. I didn't go look for this man. He's coming to my house at 5 in the morning, anytime he wants, but the restraining order's on me. And this is fair? This is law? He attacked me. He came to my house. I didn't go after him. I got brothers. We could have been vigilantes. I'm like, no, Lord, no. But no one's hearing me. But that's what I'm going through right now. That's what I'm going through right now. And I hope you guys can feel the hurt and the scaredness. Washing the dishes, you're doing this, wash dishes? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Where's the support? I used to work for the City of Aurora Police Department. And I call and call and call. No one shows up. 30 minutes later, I call them. Pull the records. I live at 13808 East 25th Avenue, right where McKay was, right where he's killed, right on the other side of the canal where they killed their little brother.
So we are hearing you tonight.
Well, I hope something's done about it. We need to change this stuff.
Yeah. You and me, let's sit down sometime.
Okay.
Let's sit down and have a conversation and see if we can get community involved and make sure that we can do what we can do. I can't promise that we can solve all of the problems, but that's what community does, is we listen to each other, we look out for each other, and let's see what we can do, okay? So before you leave, let's make sure we exchange information. Okay?
Yeah, this lady right here.
There we go.
Hi. I am just piggybacking off of Vera's question around mental health. Only my concern is about the mental health of our officers. The symptoms of secondary trauma stress include fatigue, health problems, anger, sadness, reduced productivity, absenteeism, hopelessness, despair, cynicism, and substance use. And when we look back on the behaviors we've seen from the Aurora Police Department in the last 10 years, we see repeated behaviors around these impacts of secondary traumatic stress. So my question is for the Retention and Hiring Committee, what are you doing to ensure that the mental health of our officers is being monitored so they aren't coming into our community and taking that out on our community members?
I'm sorry, just the last part of the question, could you repeat that?
Yeah, what is being done to monitor and support the mental health of our officers so they aren't coming into our community and perpetrating violence against community members?
Yeah. So that is a very, very complex question. I talked a little bit about how in monitorships we have seen increased wellness of officers. Officers feel better about their job when communities feel better about them, right?
There's no more Power Patrol.
And that's what this is about. It's a process, though. But I will say that Aurora has the best officer wellness programs that I have ever seen in a police department. They're not directly implicated in the monitorship, but I've heard about them. The psychiatric care that is provided, or psychological care that is provided to officers, as I understand it, is unlimited, and they are mandated after traumatic events to seek those services. So it's not going unaddressed for sure. Can it be better? Probably, like everything else.
Criteria of forward progress in your career?
I don't know if Jim knows the answer, or Chris maybe. Do you want to talk about that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Is it a criteria of career advancement? So to seek a promotion, do you have to have access and utilize those services in a meaningful way?
It's not, career advancement's not dependent upon that. As Mr. Slanger said, we have an incredibly robust mental health program within the police department specifically. And one of the ways that we also identify officers who may need additional assistance is some of the types of calls they go on. Obviously, some calls are more traumatic than others, such as, something that might be particularly, just emotional, uses of force. All those things contribute to us
identifying officers that we might need to reach out to. So we are very diligent about that, and we are paying attention to that very matter, because we know the better state of mind we're in, the better we're going to perform the community, the better relationships we're going to have. So we are aware of that, and we work very diligently at that every day.
I think you had a question. We're going to go here, then we're going to go back here, and then we'll come back around.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandra Pugh, and I have been a resident of Aurora, Colorado for about 21 years. My family's roots go back to the 1800s here in Colorado, so I am also a Colorado pioneer in a way. I think a lot of the discussion that we've had so far is really great, and I also wanted to talk about mental health as well, because some of the things I heard were things that I was thinking, and this is something I came up with in my mind a couple of days ago. But I'm a public health professional, and one of the things I have learned within my discipline is that we have to advocate within different sectors of society to be able to execute change for the health of citizens across the United States. And so in terms of mental health, I think it's wonderful that you guys have a mental health program, where an officer can be assisted by a social worker to handle the situations that arise in the field. I understand that because things can get very heightened. But also, with that said, social workers are a scarce resource. That is mental health professionals are scarce in general. It's hard enough for people to get therapy. So what I'm trying to think of is I understand too with the police department resources are strapped, but also if you're sending these officers into these situations, and obviously there's going to be mental health blowback on that. Sorry, I had to collect myself. To a certain extent, I think we need to think creatively about how we can use our resources. So, for example, what I'm noticing is the millennial population, younger generations, are graduating with a lot of degrees in psychology, are in sectors that are related to mental health. Why don't we use their expertise to help us? A lot of people in psychology have to meet a certain hours criteria. Let them get into the field and do that. I think, police officers only having 40 hours of training is not enough. I'm sorry, but with mental health, things can get really south really, really quickly, and it takes a trained, knowledgeable professional to a certain extent to be able to handle that. And even then, I'm just suggesting people who aren't necessarily to that level with years of experience yet, right? But I think that's something to take into account because, obviously I know you guys are getting a lot of heat and drawback, and I'm going to give it to you again. You're asking the community what we want. We've been saying what we want for years to a certain extent. Just listen to us and think creatively. I don't know what to do. I think to a certain extent, it's a little bit of fake incompetence, and I think it's a little bit ridiculous to a certain extent as well. I understand resources are strapped and stuff like that. I've learned about that. But something has got to give, and we do need to give our officers the support they need in the field, because not every call is going to be a mental health call. To a certain extent, you don't necessarily know if someone has a mental illness until you actually start interacting with them. And when things start getting escalated, sometimes it's really, really hard to get back to that spot. And when you have an officer in the field with just 40 hours of training and a lot of other stuff they have to deal with, you're not going to remember all the time in the heat of the moment that, hey, this one key de-escalation technique is to do this. You're trying to figure it out and scramble. I've been there where I get anxious too. So, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Before you go, brother, I just want to say thank you for your service. You said some things that I don't want us to blow past, and I want to connect you. We want to connect you with some folks at the end, because you said some things that we need to pay attention to, okay? But I want to say thank you for your service, and I'm sorry that you're going through this, okay?
I'm a civil rights activist / civil rights pro-activist. I'm actually out there filming the police, actually having one-on-ones actually in its rawest moment. So with all due respect, I do rebuttal that statement because I'm actually out there. And they don't trust me. A lot of these police officers don't even know basic law. Don't even know the Constitution. Don't even know their own oath. Just being honest with you. I have a YouTube page, and it'll display it all right there. These officers are absolutely out of control, and I haven't really seen too much change. Now, with that being said, before we even get to the officers, what are we doing about just the basic 911 calls as far as the dispatch? And why I'm bringing that up, because there was obviously a huge disconnect with the whole Elijah McClain situation, where the young man who called in to dispatch clearly stated that this person didn't have a weapon, he only had a mask, which unfortunately we were just all wearing not too long ago, am I correct?
Yes.
So what is the training for dispatch as far as constitutional law, just procedure on that particular part as far as actual crime being committed, because there was no crime being committed. His Fourth Amendment right was violated and he lost his life. So what are we doing to educate dispatchers to make sure that they send these officers to proper calls? And not only that, asking the right questions to determine if a crime has been broken.
So I'll let Chris speak to it in a second, but a couple of things implicated there. Number one is the Fourth Amendment, and the consent decree definitely covers the Fourth Amendment, right? So we will be looking at the legality of stops and what leads up to a stop, frisks, searches, and suspicious persons, and where a call of a suspicious person fits into that range of Fourth Amendment privilege for the police. There were changes, and I can't recite them by chapter and verse here now.
As far as dispatch?
There were changes to policy and procedures relative to suspicious persons after the Elijah McClain incident. And Chris, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So
before you start, because there's a difference between suspicious person and suspicious behavior, correct? So is that actually being taught? And not only that, reasonable articulable suspicion, RAS, a little bit lower than probable cause of a crime actually being committed. Is that being taught? Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. The answer is yes. So one of the things, positive change that has happened is suspicious behavior is based on the individual, right? Or suspicious person or activity or whatever we want to phrase that is. You might think one thing suspicious, I might think something else. Everybody in this room has a different idea of what that is based on our own personal experiences, biases, and those types of things. So what we've now asked our officers to do is, you may get a call that some activity or some behavior is suspicious, but I don't know who that caller is. I don't know what they're basing that on. I don't know what biases they may have on why they think that person should or shouldn't be there, or shouldn't be doing what they are or aren't doing. And so our officers are now mandated when we get a call like that is, first of all, to your point, Aurora 911, he's asking specific questions about what exactly is it, so it's articulable and not just a feeling or based on a bias. But also, when we get there, if we in fact respond, we make an assessment of our own on whether or not we think that there's anything to that. Now, granted, we got to be cognizant and aware of our own individual biases and experiences as well when we make that assessment, but we need to validate that call and that information that we have. I can't speak specifically to Aurora 911's training with regard to search and seizure and constitutionality. They're a separate division from the police department.
I heard that you're not over that anymore.
Correct. So I don't know what their current training protocols are with regard to that. So that would be a question that I'm unfortunately unable to answer right now.
I would encourage you to try to get that information.
I appreciate that. It does directly impact what we do and how we do it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So we will certainly be looking at that.
Happening instead of just reasonable suspicion, or I'm sorry, suspicious person or suspicious behavior.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to try to also say that we got quite a few people that want to ask questions, so if we can limit it to one question. But I already know your passion, brother. I already know your passion. With that, if we can limit it to one question, because there's still people online who want to ask questions as well. Topaz, then Pastor Nelson. Pastor Topaz, sorry.
No problem.
Good evening. I am Topaz McBride, and as a mental health professional, first of all, I definitely want to second everything that has been stated with regard to prioritizing what you're doing with mental health. I'm disappointed to hear, however, that that's not something that's taken into consideration when an officer is being looked at for promotion. That really is disturbing to me. Not only that, but it seems to me that the state of one's mental health should also be taken into consideration when they're being asked to respond to a call. Because there are certain calls that certain individuals may not necessarily be qualified to respond to effectively, depending on where they themselves are with regard to their own ability to regulate. And if indeed what I'm hearing this young man say is accurate with regard to the training that's not happening from his observation and his direct witness, that is really scary to me. So that, I just wanted to make that comment. But my question is, as someone who was a part of the task force that invested lots of hours, I don't even know how many hours we put in. There are a couple of people in the space who were part of that task force that put together a lot of this stuff already, of what this group is now redoing. And so my question is, what happened to what we already did? We're reinventing the wheel in a sense. There's some new things that could be added to it, but what happened to the work, to the hours, the free hours we put in as a task force for almost a year? What happened to that information? Because so much of what I'm hearing in this space is redundant to what we already did.
So I am unaware of the work of the task force that you're referring to, as far as I know. Maybe, Reed, do you want to talk a little bit about that task force?
Yes. Well, Omar, you were on the task force. Why don't you speak to it?
I think you bring up a good question. I think we have the task force that was put together committed a lot of hours to some of the things that we're talking about today. But I also would like to say that out of that task force is one of the reasons why we have the consent decree. There's also one of the reasons why we have an independent monitor, which was one of the requests. But at the same time, there's a whole lot more of those recommendations that we need to address. So if you haven't heard about it, then we need to make sure you get those recommendations and maybe even talk to some of those members in the task force so that there's a complete full circle of what shouldn't be repeated in some of the work that's been done. And a lot of community members have already spoken to some of these issues.
Yep.
And let me add, there were a number of other reports as well. I mean, in 21C, I was getting those numbers and letters mixed up. And a couple of other things as well. And I think it is important that we make sure that all of that homework, all of that pain and suffering goes to good use, in this process as well. Thank you, Topaz.
I think they're building blocks. And what I hope to do, what the team hopes to do, is to build on what has been done. I know about those reports. I apologize for not knowing about the task force, but certainly I want to learn about it and make sure that we are building on the work that, the good work that you all did. And I am certain that there is a lot of commonality between the work that you did do and what is going on with the consent decree and how we will be doing our work going forward. And hopefully some of the members of that task force will join the Community Advisory Council. I mean, obviously Omar is chairing that council, so we'll get that congruity there.
Thank you.
Eric Nelson, Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance. Pastor Topaz's question directly leads into my question, piggybacking off of hers. From what I can tell and from what I can see, there's definitely a communication breakdown within our city. I would hope that we could immediately address that. But just to hear some of the concerns from the citizens that's been happening, I'm heartbroken by it. Because I had no idea. With that being said, all roads lead right back to our city manager. And God knows, Jim, I hate to just put you on the spot, but however you can handle this. Can you speak to a little bit of the timeline, the implementation of the process of what's already been put in place in terms of the previous committee to what you're hearing now? Can we speak to like how soon that's going to happen?
The previous committee, did you say?
Yes. The committee that was put in place, that Pastor Topaz just mentioned. Yes.
Right. Yeah, and I think to Pastor Reed's comment, over the course of the last probably 15 months, we've had the task force, we've had the Elijah McClain investigation, we've had 21CP, we've had the patterns and practice from the Attorney General's office, which culminated in the consent decree. We've had the investigation of the Attorney General's grand jury investigation into Elijah McClain. And with all of those things feeding into really the direction we need to go. And so I think we were hesitant to get ahead of ourselves, knowing, for example, with the Elijah McClain investigations, there were concrete recommendations as a part of that, as a part of the 21CP, the patterns of practice, and the task force. We have all these things coming together, and really what we need to be doing is sorting through those, and there's overlap, and then there are pieces where there's no overlap that we have to kind of knit together and kind of build this matrix of things that we need to do, things we need to implement in the department. Each one took a bit of a different lens in looking at the police department and to some extent the fire department. So it's a lot to weave together, but we're committed to doing that.
So follow up, so what I'm hearing, you're saying within the first 90 days, you'll have a more concrete idea of what will be implemented sooner than later?
Well, when did the clock start? That, I think if we said we start the clock today and we come up with that matrix, that document, I think that's doable.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill Valdez. I'm the president of Northwest Aurora Community Organization, and I work also for Aurora Public Schools. And I taught 2 years at Hinckley High School and witnessed firsthand the RSOs that were working there. And we have a youth violence situation that's out of control in the city right now, all over the city. And what I witnessed with the RSO officers is that they have very little knowledge of how to deal with the youth with social emotional skills. And they need proper training to be able to effectively have rapport with the youth with social emotional skills, because that's what's broken down with the youth we have today. They either haven't learned their social emotional skills, or they're ignoring them because they think they're too old for that, or they've been neglected by other adults that have examples of the proper social emotional skills. And your RSO officers are not doing that at all. So they need to get the proper training. So is the decree going to address that as well? Because that's part of APD, right?
It's definitely part of APD.
Yes.
It's not directly part of the consent decree.
Oh, it isn't?
It is not. But that being said, there is a program from the federal government that has been brought in to Aurora. It's called the PSP program, that is in fact dealing directly with that issue. And we on the consent decree team are dealing directly with that team to make sure that we are not working at odds with one another, but are in fact enhancing one another. So it's being addressed through that channel. I don't know, Chris, if you want to say anything more about that.
I'll just say that we recognize youth violence is a huge problem in our community, and we are absolutely committed to making strides in that area. To the point, the PSP program, they were just in town this last week, and we had several conversations with them as far as where our initiatives are going to go as we start moving through this year. We're just getting off the ground with that. We know that this time of year is busy, especially as kids are going to start getting out of school. So I've doubled down some efforts to communicate with school districts to reach kids now, because once they're loose during the summer, they're much harder to message with. So we are working really hard right now to get constructive activities put together for our youth that are both city-sponsored and sponsored within the community, so they have a good place to go instead of just having too much time in their hands. So we're absolutely committed to that. And I'll just throw it over to Marco quick, put you on the spot. You can talk. He's our lead for the PSP program, so I'll just give him a minute to talk about that. That's Deputy Chief Hildebrand.
Hi. So, the Public Safety Partnership is a federally sponsored program to the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Just this past week, we had subject matter experts in youth violence that came in, met with the agency, schools, hospitals, stakeholders, community members, sat down and talked about what we're currently doing as far as youth violence is concerned. They have experience throughout the nation looking at best practices. Really, they're looking at violence intervention for the youth population and youth violence interrupters. So what we call them is pathways off this line of thinking incarceration or possibly being injured or killed in our streets, which is the last thing we want. Any three of those things are horrible. But we can get them on a road or pathway off of that to get them the resources they need to be productive within our community and get their lives back on track. So within the next few months, we're going to get a report back. They're going to do an assessment and look at what's going to work for Aurora as far as what types of things we can put in place in order to, one, impact youth violence and provide resources for our youth population.
Thank you. It's almost 9 o'clock, and we're still going good here. Everybody feeling good, Jeff? Yeah, I see a couple people nodding off it, but stop that, okay? We'll keep going here for a while longer. We haven't gotten to any online questions yet at all, so my plea is brevity, okay? Please.
My question is, and I'll make it real short as far as the backup to make it quick, but my question is, how does the City Council work into your efforts? Just very quickly, I've recently seen that there's been a oppositional stance taken by the City Council, a majority. I'm not talking behind their back. I said the other night to them that I believe they hold our community in contempt. And I said that to them. I believe that. I believe that for a lot of reasons. Only one of which, is I think they reframed a youth effort as a gang violence, which to me is simply unconscionable. Because that's again just saying we're going to stigmatize, we're going to label, we're going to that's only one of many. I'm wondering how they work into this, because whatever is done, they can undo.
So, just briefly, I view this all as an ecosystem. We talk about recruitment, and if there is friction in the city council and an officer who is being recruited has a choice between here or there, it may be there rather than here. So all of this is important. But that being said, we, the monitors, are apolitical. Regardless of who is sitting, I said this before, in the seats of city government, there is a consent decree that we are going to do our darndest to make sure gets enforced. And more importantly, gets accomplished. And politics is politics. Getting this done can be made harder, certainly to your point, by certain factors within politics, but we will get it done nonetheless.
Are you saying that there will be feet held to the fire in that respect as well?
Well, we don't have the power to hold the city council's feet to the fire, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately. We're apolitical. That's a political process.
And you are not a voter.
I'm not a voter either.
Here in
Yes,
Aurora.
correct.
But there are some of us in the room that are. And so that really gets to be maybe more our job than their job. So anyway.
I just wanted that to be
thank you.
figured into the whole ecosystem.
Thank you.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you guys for being here, but specifically thank you to our Aurora Police Department, to our city manager, to our community residents, activists, agents, faith-based leaders. My name is Maisha Fields, and I am a survivor of gun violence. My brother, Javad Marshall Fields, and his fiancée, Vivian Wolf, were murdered. I have worked with now we're going on 4 police chiefs, so this is not a new problem. And in fact, when we look back at Senate Bill 217, untruthfulness, there was some untruthfulness that happened in my brother's case that led to his death after a mass shooting, and him being a witness and why that case wasn't solved. So I really want to know, as it relates to the consent decree, going back to what Eric Nelson said, a lot of people have said this, Topaz has said, the state has already laid a really strong framework. Senator Rhonda Fields is my mother, and she brought forth the legislation for Senate Bill 217. And if we're honest with ourselves, Chief Wilson was the one who took this by the bullhorns and said, I'm going to work to make sure that Aurora is compliant with the new state law. Specifically, untruthfulness, repeated failure to follow post-board training requirements, decertification, and termination for cause. Now, she eventually lost her job, we know that. And there is a high amount of distrust, not just within the community, but also within the police force. And there's some people within the union that felt like Senate Bill 217 was not something that the state of Colorado should be doing. There's some officers who felt like it was not time for Aurora. So how will are you familiar with Senate Bill 217?
Very familiar.
And as you are familiar with it, have you already, in your elementary stages of building out this report, looked at the data and created measurable goals as to where Aurora stands within these 4 criteria and where we want to be next year and the next 4 years, because this is a 5-year commitment, correct?
At least, yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that and the state efforts, because they already did the whole national what we should be doing. So how that information is going to be used to guide this process. And if the next meeting is not going to be us talking, but you telling us what the plan is and what you learned from what has already been done.
So, a couple of things. 60 days into this. But what we are trying to do is to understand the data that we need to collect, some of which is being collected, others of which is not being collected. We had 2 meetings today on just that very topic. So that with respect to specifically stops and the data there. There are other areas of Senate Bill 217 that don't directly apply to the consent decree, but nonetheless tangentially hit upon it. And we are certainly, as I said, we're doing the work for the state legislature as well. You may have missed that. I think you came in late.
Say that.
Yeah. So we are, one, intimately aware that we need the statistics. We have to make sure that the department is gathering the right data in order to give you evidence-based an evidence basis for what we find, and that's how we'll go about it.
And just the second part of that, so you guys are going to come back with smart and measurable goals of where should we be?
So we have those MADCs. Part of the MADCs in certain aspects relate to smart measurable goals. But love to talk to you more about it. Sure.
I think it's time to see if we have a question or a comment from our online group.
We have one.
We have one. All right.
Good evening. My name is Amy Wiles, and I am the chairperson of the city's Human Relations Commission. And since the firing of Chief Wilson, we have been inundated with messages, calls, stopped at various community events from concerned citizens who feel like there will be a backslide following the firing of Chief Wilson, because she was making, advancements within relationship building with the community. And so what message could you give us to provide to them as they call in regarding this concern and the assurances that progress will continue and that we will not backslide and revert back to previous practices by the Aurora Police Department?
So I mentioned before the exemplary cooperation that we have received from the police department and from the fire department. Part of the basis for that was a decision by Chief Wilson to put Chief Jewell in charge of the consent decree and its processes. And Chief Jewell is now the acting chief of the department. And I have received the assurances, and we will accept nothing less than a chief, both interim and ultimately permanent, who is committed to everything that Chief Wilson was committed to in terms of making sure that this consent decree reaches its goal of substantial compliance and a process of continuous improvement that will be sustained long after we leave.
It looks like to me, it's going to be the same thing. I haven't heard that interim chief say one thing about what we said over here about that incident. You didn't say nothing. You just sat over there. Say something. One of your officers, I know, say something. Don't chase us when we go outside and give us no ticket. Do something now. While people are looking, we want to hear from the chief or acting chief. What do you think about what your officers did to this young man? You didn't say nothing.
Chris, do you want to address it? Yeah.
Yeah, just briefly. Sir, I am absolutely 100% committed to moving this police department forward and making improvements. I know we can do better, without question. With regard to that specific incident, we can all do better things. We can all make better decisions, and that includes our officers, it includes our training, it includes everything that we do. I'm committed to making this a better organization, 100%. And I'm also committed to full investigations in any use of force, not just that one, all of them, with regard that any of our officers are involved in. So I'm making that commitment to you. I'm going to leave it at that. Right. And I'm happy to talk offline with you, sir, after this, and with the gentleman that was sitting next to you.
Yeah.
I hear the anger, I hear the frustration, I hear the desperation.
That's right. That's how we coming at you. We're coming at you from that.
And I will be responsive to that, and to you, sir, and to the gentleman that's next to you. All of you deserve the same service that any other member of this community deserves. All right, I'll close with that for now, and we can chat afterwards.
We need action. Okay, do we have any other questions online?
No more.
Anybody on the phone?
I don't think there's anyone on the phone either.
I think Omar wants to just say a few words.
I want to go back to Topaz's statement about, Pastor Topaz, I got to get there. Pastor Topaz, about the role, the community role in this. It's nowhere near duplicating the great work that was done by the task force. It's strictly to have community voice in the focus of the consent decree. At the same time, I think part of that data, especially since it's being brought up, will be some of the things that took place out of the task force. But I just wanted to say it's not a duplication of what took place with the task force. It's strictly community voice of what is outlined in the consent decree.
And I would just like to say one thing to clear the air on this. The reason that Chief Joel didn't stand up is because the ground rules from our point of view was that I would direct the conversation, and I neglected to direct the conversation and introduce it. But I just want you to know.
Okay, so one more question here.
How does one get involved with the CAC?
Well, you set us up. So we are in the process of forming that CAC right now. And Omar and I are kind of in charge of recruiting and filling that out. Now, obviously, if we have 50 people from the community that apply for it, not everybody can be on that. We're looking for a group of like 10 to 12. You can actually go online,
AuroraMonitor.org.
AuroraMonitor.org, and you will see a tab there for community involvement, and you can fill out just a little tiny application, and then we'll be in touch with you and anyone else who wants to be a part of that CAC. We are eager to do that. We want to make sure that it is an inclusive bunch, so we will, and Omar at this point and I have been sort of given the task to kind of fill that out and make recommendations. So if that group is not kind of what you think it should be, it's Omar's fault. He's messed that part up. But even so, the city has not directed us in any way of who to put on that or who not to put on that. The consent decree monitors have given us flexibility in doing that. But I think we're determined to do it in a way that represents our community, every aspect of our community.
Or is it just going to be something you guys do and then after that it just fizzles out?
I think this is just through the term of the consent decree.
Well, it can certainly outlast the consent decree if that's what everybody wants it to do at the end of the consent decree. As I said, we want to leave Aurora in a state where what we are doing is being done internally by the police department, by the city, that the proper mechanisms of accountability, transparency, and discipline are set up so that you all have faith in the department operating in the way that it should. I said before that the best department in the world is going to have incidents of police officers screwing up in one way or another. They're human. It happens. It happens in medicine. It happens in every industry.
I don't think we're so concerned about departments screwing up. It's the accountability part.
Well, and that's the point I was getting to. It is important to understand there needs to be the accountability in place, and the measure of a department is not whether it has or hasn't screwed up, it's how it deals with it.
Exactly.
That's
how
it.
we can change it.
And it can be changed.
To be consistent, not just we do it and then all of a sudden it just fizzles underneath the rug.
Same thing again.
Absolutely. 50 years I've been
This
here.
advisory committee, we own. It's community. And so we can decide what it becomes after that. And we even have quite a bit of flexibility of deciding some of its scope now. And so, we don't know where it heads. You do.
When you make some of your decisions public, like say for instance, if y'all have the compassion and the heart to help this man that got beat down by your cops. And if you all go back and look at that, maybe we need the Department of Justice to come in here and help y'all. Maybe y'all need the DOJ in here,
So the Attorney General has filled that role, and I have worked on federal consent decrees, and I can tell you that the Attorney General's office did an excellent job in half the time with half the resources in terms of putting this together.
Okay, I hear you. What I'm trying to say to you is Fox 31 broke the film down to frame by frame by frame, from the step on the neck to the carotid hole. They broke it. So how do you put somebody back on the street and they did all this? You put them back on the street as if nothing happened. Oh, you black folks, we just beat y'all ass. So what? So what? Y'all might pay taxes, y'all might not. So what?
There's just one.
I mean, you know the stuff that y'all say about us.
I hear everything you're saying, and I think Chief has said that he wants to talk about it. I certainly and the team am more than willing. We will be looking into it, I can assure you that. But you said something about your police department. The important thing is it's all of our police departments, right? And
it should be all of our police departments.
And it is yours. We have to make it better together. That's my view.
Like Hell's Kitchen is Hell's people right now, and the people need help. They need help. Like they do Hell's Kitchen and bar rescue. What about people rescue? We need to do that
The thing is
and make it
that
work.
we cannot make any changes if we keep firing the police chief who's making some changes.
Right.
Listen to the people. The people
tell
aren't
those
gonna
people
lie.
who were laying down on that ground in that 100-degree weather. Go tell that black family that.
That little kid.
Tell that family that.
Like
that you can't fire the police chief. Under her watch, her officers did that. Tell that white guy who got pistol whipped by the police. Huh? You don't think we know about that? You think I just talk about black folk, huh? He got pistol whipped. Now go tell that man. See, stop all that talking about deflected over here. What if it was your family or you? What would you say then?
I asked the police. What if it was me? One of them like that? How they
Get out of here. Come on, miss me with all that.
We need action. We need action. We need action, and we need results. Right. We need it, and we need it now. Because if not, it's just going to get even worse.
It's going to get worse. But we're also not talking about the case law as far as Gonzalez versus Castle Rock, where it actually states in the law that police are not legally required to protect any citizen in the United States. But we're not having that conversation, though, right? So, is this Hallmark or Disneyland, or we're not really having a real conversation right now. These police are not required to protect us by law. So if we get our asses whooped and they can walk by, they won't be held accountable. Maybe policy-wise, but not legally.
Amen.
So when are we going to have that truthful conversation that the police were never designed to protect the public? When are we going to have that conversation? When are we going to have that conversation as far as what they were actually developed to create? And that's to protect white supremacy.
I think that's an important conversation to have before we are able to fix all the things that need to be fixed.
Just saying.
Probably not for tonight.
Yeah, we need action. And we need to have meetings like this every month. 2, 3, 4, 5 of them.
Then we're not having a real conversation, are we?
Well, not tonight, but we can certainly in subsequent times.
But you need to get on that group.
So let's.
12 people ain't gonna use it.
I think we've kind of gone through the questions here, online, on the phone. Omar, let me make a couple comments. I'll give you a final word, okay? You can fix it all here in just a bit, okay? One of the things that I want to remind you is that we have been invited tonight by the Attorney General's office, by the City Manager's office, by the consent decree monitors to be engaged. And I really appreciate you being here tonight to be engaged. We talked about a bunch of topics, a bunch of things, much of which is in the consent decree, but some of it is not. But it is our ability to continue these conversations and to deal with things that don't specifically apply to that particular document. We have been invited to engage. And so let's step up and accept that invitation, not just tonight, not just when it's convenient for us, but over these next 5 years, over the next decade. Let's stay engaged. Let's accept that invitation that was politely offered tonight to be involved and to be engaged. And that means that we bring all of our passions, we bring our anger, we bring our frustrations, we bring whatever we have to be a part of that conversation. The other phrase that I heard a couple different times was hold feet to the fire. That kind of sounds like fun, doesn't it? And again, that really comes back to us as community, to not let some of this stuff slide away, to make sure that some of these things get addressed, to just make sure that it doesn't go away. Again, that's our responsibility to continue to bring it up. It's our responsibility to work on these things. That is part of community.
Can we do an email? Can you let us sign in and put our names and do an email so you can send us an email when you have the next meeting?
More people.
Yeah. Well, we can do that. So thank you for being here. Again, let's stay engaged. This is important work. It's not quick work. It's not going to be something that's going to be perfect, but it's something we all have to be a part of. Omar?
As I said in the beginning, we have a community that's in pain. And I hear you, brother, and I hear the brother over here. There's a lot of trauma in the room. And it's going to take a lot of uncomfortable conversations moving forward for us to get past it. And it's going to be criticisms on all sides. We're going to have some thick skin to get through this. I'm just going to be honest. It's not going to be pretty. Some of it not going to be pretty. I've seen it in LA. It's not pretty. But if the end goal, if we can get consistent on the end goal of making sure we have a public safety service that we can believe in, that respects the community, that's being held accountable when there's an abuse of power, and at the same time have the resources they need to make sure that this brother right here is not going through what he's going through, shouldn't have to go through this after serving our country.
Right.
And this young brother right here not to go through what he's been through, and we see the pictures. Let's make sure that if that's the end goal for all of us, we'll be willing to dive into these uncomfortable conversations because it'll be worth it in the end. So us as volunteers, we don't work, let me be clear, we don't work for the company. This is volunteers, and we are doing it because we believe in the work, and we believe the consent decree can be a mechanism to get us where we need to be in the city of Aurora.
Can I say something? First of all, thank you all. Thank you for being here, for your commitment to do what you've started and carrying this through. We got to start somewhere, so it's appreciated.
Thank you.
Amen. Definitely appreciated. But I also wanted to just let community know, I'm also a part of Shop Talk Live. I'm the deputy director for Shop Talk Live. We're going to be hosting a forum on Friday evening at Connections Cafe at Restoration. And that forum is open to all of community to come and talk about what it is that you are looking for, what are your demands for the next police chief of Aurora. And we're going to get this information back to
Black female.
Back to this committee.
A black female police chief. She can't be no worse than what we already had.
And so we want to hear from, okay, I hear you, brother. Whatever you feel that is going to be critical for us to move forward and to get rid of what the person that was online that offered, because that's real. She talked about all the calls that were coming in from concerned citizens who are now really afraid because of the chief being gone, and what does that mean for the community being at greater risk from police officers. So we want to work on closing that, and with the interim chief, you're invited to attend, or if you want to send a representative so that you can hear that too, that's fine. But really, this is really for community to come and share your voice.
What time and where again?
That is at 6:30 on Friday, and that is in Connections Cafe at Restoration Christian Fellowship, which is at 6th and Center Tech. behind the Maverick over there. It's Connections Cafe over there.
Let me say, once again, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. Looking forward to being engaged. It's getting to that hour. I work for a school district, and I know I got some kids that's going to be waiting on us to get back. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.